Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Please accept our humble obeisances. All glory Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Guru. We can't see you for some reason, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. I'm here.
Yes, I can see you now.
I'm on screen, yeah?
Yes, you are now, Guru Maharaj. Thank you. Thank you for joining the call, Guru Maharaj, and welcome to all the devotees. So today, Guru Maharaj will be talking about his upcoming book about the natural living. The book's title is Natural Living, and as always, Guru Maharaj is always stress about natural living, farm community, and simple living, basically. So I will look forward to hear from you, Guru Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Om Gyantam Mirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Ma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Vastyatya De Satarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhascha Kripa Sindhupe Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So today I'll be reading some quotes with Srila Prabhupada by discussions with Srila Prabhupada with his devotees and some direct quotes by His Divine Grace. Regarding the subject of natural living, simple living. Before I'll begin, I wanted to kind of like set the stage for what I'm trying to communicate. Srila Prabhupada, in beginning his Krishna consciousness movement, patterned his whole program after something that he wrote in the 1940s. 1949, I believe it was. It was called Gita Nagari, which illustrated 4 principles by which the whole society that he was about to start was meant to be organized around. And then with the goal ultimately is establishing a lifestyle that is synonymous with and complementary with the natural aesthetic, moral, and spiritual principles that make up the living being. In other words, what is natural living? There is such a thing, and it's taught by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and in other works, and Srila Prabhupada illustrated it. Before we get into that, I want to just mention that in this Gita Nagari scheme, as Srila Prabhupada labeled it, he mentioned these 4 principles. And I believe about a year ago, I addressed these 4 principles as a series of talks. And I'll just give a little summary of these 4 principles, or 4 programs, I should say, 4 programs for expanding Krishna consciousness worldwide. The first one which Srila Prabhupada very enthusiastically developed, and it's titled Holy Books, Holy Names. If you go back to the early days of our publications, especially the Back to Godhead publications, you'll find that most of the publications were highlighting Harinams all around the world in different places, mostly in America, of course, because that's where the movement started. But then it started to transfer itself into other countries, such as Europe, many of the countries in Europe. And the UK, of course, was one of the main countries. So you'll see in those early Back to Godhead magazines, devotees doing Harinam in various places around the world. After some time, book distribution somehow or other came more foremost. And Srila Prabhupada started to translate the Vedic scriptures. And he started to think of ways to distribute this knowledge. Devotees, both by accident and by using their intelligence, came up with different ways, and gradually as the books were being produced, that became more and more focused. That aligned itself along with Prabhupada's program of Harinams. It was Harinams book distribution, which went all around the United States. And because of that, a lot of money was coming in. And these temples, the temples you see today, the grand temples such as the Chicago Temple, the Miami Temple, the New York Temple, the Los Angeles Temple, the San Francisco Temple. There's a whole list of temples all around, huge edifices where gorgeous forms of worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead were being performed. Of course, that worship came later, and that was the second phase of Srila Prabhupada's movement, was to deities and deity worship and gorgeous temples. And at the same time, preaching centers where devotees could easily do the service of book distribution and holy names. In other words, they could go out on Sankirtan quite regularly and readily without a lot of extra other services there. Deity worship came in a little bit later, but then as it came in, it brought in the Indian community. When it brought into the Indian community, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that the opulence in deity worship should increase. And Prabhupada established Radha Krishna deities, Jagannath, Gaurnitai, Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman, Prahlad Nrsingadev, practically in many, many major cities all around the world. So after holy names and holy books, deity worship and the gorgeousness and the opulence started to become a feature in our society, which attracted in large numbers the Indian community, because the Indian community very much is inclined to worship the deity. That has been the tradition in India since time immemorial. So when Prabhupada did it, he did it in such a grand way that people were coming simply to see the deity, to offer the gifts to the deities, to actually take part in the worship. And so temples started to expand along with deity worship and supported by book distribution. And then as that went on, of course, simultaneously, which was, we might say, the third part of Srila Prabhupada's program, was to establish a Brahminical society, training persons to develop Brahminical qualities. And that was illustrated around training and education through various classes and seminars, and teaching what is a Brahmin and the values of the Brahmin and the activities of a Brahmin. So then that took the form of initiation. So many people came forward and initiation. Of course, initiation was there at the beginning, but no one knew what it was and what was the purpose of it. They thought it was just being a member of society. But Prabhupada made that as an establishment to train a class of people to lead the world with Brahminical culture. In other words, a class of highly intelligent persons who live based on revealed scriptures and who also teach revealed scriptures. And so Prabhupada put a lot of emphasis on that. So that was 3 of the programs out of the 4 that Srila Prabhupada really put forth: holy books, holy jails, temples, deity worship, Brahminical society, initiations, and education along with that. So as the society started to develop based on this, it went from place to place, and temples were opening, preaching centers were opening, restaurants were opening. Prabhupada wanted restaurants also to allow people to come and taste nice Krishna Prasadam as an experience, because Krishna Prasadam is not just simply food, it's transcendental mercy of the Lord coming in the form of foodstuffs, which is a very powerful way to attract people to spiritual life. And so there was restaurants opening, and practically every restaurant was named Govinda. There was a few that were named few other names, such as what was it? Higher Taste and Simply Wonderful. Some of the restaurants were named like that. And so restaurants, schools, and of course Gurukulas. Prabhupada started Gurukula, especially in Dallas. Dallas was the main place for the Gurukula in the early days. And then we had Gurukulas all around the world, in Vrindavan, in Mayapur, and in other places, to give the children a good start in life by giving them spiritual education along with the material requirements needed. And so Prabhupada had a grand picture. Prabhupada's whole idea was to transform the entire world into spiritual consciousness through this program. Prabhupada's vision was not simply to start some kind of spiritual organization and get people to engage in devotional service. His whole idea was a cultural revolution based on spiritual principles that were the foundation of the Vedic culture to transform the entire world from top to bottom in all aspects of life. And that means, you name it, whatever subject it is, from mathematics to science to geography to ecology, everything, fitting it into the Vedic culture was the superior culture, the culture that is based on the mode of goodness, which elevates one to the platform of spiritual practice. So Prabhupada wanted to make a spiritual revolution and change the whole world inside out. And he has become successful up to a point. And Prabhupada mentions, and he starts to mention it in 1974 in some of his lectures, that, and then 75, 76, and 77, it increased. He says, we have to develop a lifestyle by which devotees can live naturally according to religious principles and not be hankered and, harassed by an artificial lifestyle. And Prabhupada started to speak about the importance of starting farm communities. Of course, Gita Nagari was started in the early 1970s, 1970, I believe, New Vrindavan even before that. But it became just a place, more like a rural community. It didn't really develop accordingly until recently, as people are starting to understand deeper the importance of Srila Prabhupada's program. Now, Prabhupada wanted to establish this for 2 reasons. One, and I'll read some quotes by Srila Prabhupada to help you illustrate why he wanted to establish this. It wasn't simply for a better lifestyle. He also foresaw, and he made many comments, that the present civilization will not last. He has made so many statements in this regard. In 1973, he said, in 50 years, this whole Western civilization will collapse. And I'll read one particular quote by Srila Prabhupada in that regard, where he says, he said, this was in 1975, but he also said, he says, civilization will collapse very soon. All over the world, it will collapse. Either you bring this ism or that ism, this civilization. People will become mad, being harassed in so many ways. When one is harassed with so many problems, he commits suicide. So that position is coming. So that was from a morning walk conversation, November 29th in Delhi in 1975. So I'll read a little conversation. So Prabhupada's idea was to establish self-sufficiency based on natural living as the way to continue the human civilization. In other words, he saw us as being the vanguard or the foundational organization which would help bring about a change in the world where people could find a lifestyle that would be easy and natural once this other lifestyle was finished. Because, and I'll divert a little bit, why there are so many material problems? We have the best economists, we have the best political thinkers, we have the best social thinkers, people who are expert in sociology, political sciences, economics, and everything. And they've created a civilization, but the only problem is it is not God conscious. It's a civilization that is simply based on propagating material gain. And the principle is, as that continues, then sinful activities will also continue, and that's what you have today. As sinful activities continue, there's a reaction. In that reaction, Mother Nature, being the instrument of Krishna, to punish the living entities accordingly, or to reward them accordingly, according to their activities within the three modes of material nature. When people act piously, they get material benedictions. When people act impiously, they get sufferings due to material calamities based on that. One of the examples of that calamity is unnecessary killing of living entities simply for some economic gain that you have in the world today, where thousands and thousands of animals are sent to slaughterhouses every day for just so someone can make more money and people can supposedly find some kind of foodstuffs, which is really not healthy for the human being anyway. That's another subject. But the idea is that these living entities are dear to Krishna. Krishna says, Aham Bija Vita Vita, I am the seed-giving father of all living entities. All living entities are parts and parcels of me. They're actually in me. They belong to me. And as a father who loves his children, he loves equally each and every living entity. So the principle of life is not to disturb the life of another living entity for one's own selfish economic or political reasons. But what we have today is wanton cow slaughter, abortions, and various other forms of genocide that is going on in the name of economic development or economic feasibility. And people are accepting these things as a way of life. That's why Prabhupada, when he started the movement, not only did he give the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, but he establishes the blockades that one must follow. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, and no gambling. Srila Prabhupada explains that these four are the four pillars of sinful activities. One who refrains from these four will be free from all reactions of all sinful activities. And each one of them contains many other forms of sinful activities within him. So out of these four, there are so many other ways by which one can perform sinful activity. But in the material world, people disregard these. They think these things are just normal parts of life. And therefore, society goes on in just exploiting material nature and in committing sinful activities in the name of material progress or just in wanton sense gratification. When this reaches a certain level of development, what we have is a crisis. When the world becomes more and more attuned to that, then the collective karma of that sinful activities comes out in the form of wars or pestilence. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, you have this statement, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, chapter 15, verse number 24. Prabhupada explains very clearly that because of cow killing, animal killing, you have what is called pestilence and wars, and these are the reactions from these things. But there is more to it than that. That's just a simplified explanation of it. There is much more to than that. So Prabhupada could understand that the present civilization, which is based on sinful activity and exploitation of the material energy, just like we all know that when the lockdown came in 2020, many people were not going out, cars were not being used as much, factories were slowing down. The whole atmosphere became almost normal again. Places all around the world that were full of smog and various types of pollution started to clear up by nature's own arrangement. So the earth is being ravaged tremendously by this present civilization. Not only are the individuals suffering, but Mother Earth is suffering tremendously due to the exploitation based on industry, technology, and now you have 4G and 5G, which is another form of ravaging the energy of the earth. So therefore, when Prabhupada made that statement in 1973 and again in 75, this whole civilization will collapse, he was not just simply speaking just to sound good. He was actually giving us a vision of what will happen in the future unless people change. But the change has never come. It's only becoming worse and worse. And therefore, Prabhupada understood that in order to keep human civilization going, there has to be a lifestyle that is conducive to Krishna consciousness. And therefore, understanding the Vedic culture, the Vedic lifestyle, and how people lived years ago, he understood that self-sufficiency, growing your own food, keeping agriculture, keeping animals in order to support that type of lifestyle, especially cows and bulls and horses and other domestic animals, and living free from the encumbrance of all of the so-called necessities that are provided in spiritual life. And I'll read some quotes. This is from Srila Prabhupada here in a conversation. Prabhupada, this one disciple is speaking, and he said, "The tractor, this is the cause of all trouble. It took all of the young man's farm work and forced him to go into the cities and become tangled in sensuality. You said people have to leave the country and the simple life of goodness and God consciousness. And so they went to the city and got caught up in the anxious life, the mode of passion." Srila Prabhupada, yes, in the city, people must naturally fall into the mode of passion, constant anxiety due to needless lusting and striving. In the cities, we are surrounded by all sorts of artificial things for agitating our mind and senses. And naturally, when we have this facility, we become lusty. We take to this passionate mode and then become filled with anxiety. Disciple, the country is more peaceful. It's easier to think of spiritual life. Yes, there is less disease. Everything is less brain taxing. In the country, the pangs of this material world are less. So you can arrange your life for real profit, spiritual profit, realize God, become God conscious. And if you have a temple in your home or near your home, you have a very happy life. You work just a little, just for your food. In the spring, a month and a half, and so for planting. In the fall, a month and a half for harvesting. And in your remaining time, you naturally become culturally enriched. You engage all your talents and energies for realizing God consciousness. This is the ideal life. Prabhupada, this tractor is the downfall of the Indian village system because you are eating the bulls, therefore you require a tractor. Otherwise, you don't kill the bulls. The animal will do the business of the tractor. Machines means unemployment for many. Tractors, they're unemployment for bulls and the plowmen, and they have bulls have to be killed. Unemployment, then kill them. Vietnam, send all men to fight and kill them. As soon as there's overpopulation, they declare war so that people may be killed. So this is an interesting statement. And now there is much talk about the Malthusian theory. Prabhupada talks about this Malthusian theory. And I'll read one statement by Srila Prabhupada in regards to this Malthusian theory. And here, Malthus was an economist who was a British economist back in the 1850s. And Malthus said, and I'll read, the economic theory of Malthus states that whenever there is overpopulation, there must be an outbreak of war, epidemic, famine, or the like to curb it. These natural activities don't take place by chance, but are planned. This is interesting. These activities of war, epidemic, and famine don't take chance, they are planned. Anyone who says they are a matter of chance has insufficient knowledge. This is a conversation Prabhupada did in Los Angeles, June 1972, and is printed in the Journey of Self-Discovery, one book by Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada talks about this person called Malthus, and he was an economist that says that if there's too much people in the world, then there has to be a way of reducing the population. And war, epidemics, famine, and the like are ways to curb the population. And these are being done by governments today to reduce the population, because right now they feel there's too many people in the world. And so the world cannot support all of these. But when you look at it from the Krishna conscious perspective, or you mean from the perspective of the mode of goodness, you'll find, as Srila Prabhupada has stated, that the earth can produce 10 times as much resources as it's presently producing to support a greater amount of population than it is right now. But because people are sinful, and this is the main point, the earth is withholding her bounty, her gifts to the living entities, and there appears to be scarcity. Of course, that scarcity is also due to an imbalance among the population, where you have 1% or 2% of the population controlling and owning about 90% of the resources. So because there is a society run by demons, you don't have any kind of equality, fraternity, civility, or any aesthetic or moral values being propagated. It's all about economic gain, economic development. So Prabhupada foresaw, and he said it, he said, this civilization will collapse, therefore establish these farms. And he gave many, many statements in regard to what he meant by establishing these particular farms. And I'll give you a few statements by Srila Prabhupada here. He says, this was in Bombay, 18th December 1974. Our farm projects are extremely important part of our movement. Extremely. We must become self-sufficient by growing our own grains, producing our own milk. Then there will be no question of poverty. So develop these farm communities as far as possible. They should be developed as an ideal society depending on natural products, not industry. Industry has simply created godlessness because they think they can manufacture everything that they need. Yeah, so this idea, as long as we can get all the material things we need, why do we need God? So this idea of so-called industrial revolution is simply another way to push out God and replace it with all the so-called material amenities and what we say, activities for sense gratification and economic development. So what is the need for God? Prabhupada again in May 25th, 1975 in Honolulu, create Vrindavan, keep Krishna here, cows here, calves here, produce your own food. It will become Vrindavan. This is Vrindavan. When there is Krishna, when there are cows, when there is agriculture, that is Vrindavan. So you should produce enough food, grains, fodder for the cows, and live peacefully. Chant Hare Krishna, make this life. At least one life we should do this. It is a very happy life. So why is it happy? Because it's natural, but the idea, it is also happy. It gets rid of all of these artificial amenities and arrangements that are set up by society simply to sap the energy of the earth and to make people work hard in these factories and various other types of hardworking agencies, simply so they can get a little bit of paper money and then use that paper money to buy things and then spend their whole life simply working and buying, working and buying, working and buying. Working unnecessarily and buying things we don't need. Statistics have proved, and this is a recent statistic, that 90% of the products on the open market are considered to be non-essential. In other words, you can live without it. What do we need to live? We need food, we need clothing, we need some kind of shelter, we need some arrangements for education and medical care. Outside of that, all of the extras, there's so many extras just to tantalize people's desires for sense gratification. So Prabhupada called this a soul-killing society. And he said, it won't last. And why is he saying it won't last? Because it can't go on in the way it's going on. And we're seeing today, in today's precarious situation, you're seeing large cracks coming into the social, economic, and political fields now. What you see on the news is not what's going on in the world. The news has blacked out what is actually happening all around the world. People are very much unrest about what is happening in the world, and it's getting worse and worse. And therefore, also in America, crimes are going on, and even the police and the law enforcement agencies are not even enforcing law and order amongst the crime. They're allowing these crimes to go on because they can't control it. It's out of hand, especially in America. So Prabhupada's vision for the future was two things. One, here is the way to live. Two, we will need this way to live in order to continue our life free from this civilization which will no longer last. Recently, I posted on the conference a link to a conversation with my god sister Govinda Dasi, who joined the movement in 1968 in San Francisco, California, and then went to Hawaii for about 40 or 50 years. She had much personal association with Srila Prabhupada. During that time, in this conversation that was posted on Namras's podcast, you can still see it. It's there on YouTube. Govinda Dasi Namras's podcast. In that discussion, she points out many of the things that Prabhupada predicted. And what she said is partly what I'm saying here. He said that in 50 years, the society will collapse. And he also said that soon that paper money will be completely useless. He says the whole banking system will change and will also collapse, and the paper money will be no longer have any value at all. And Prabhupada, you can see, if you just trace the history of money, you'll see that 100 years ago, people had gold coins, silver coins, gold, silver, natural metals were actually a source of wealth, and it came in the form of monetary exchanges. Now, then they took these gold coins and silver coins and made a metal alloy out of it and used nickel and copper and various other things and created coins. And gradually, at first, you used to say on the money that the money is backed by a gold standard, but that is no longer true anymore. Now they don't even print that anymore because it's not true. You can't take your money and trade it in for the equal amount of gold. The gold is not on the market, it's available. If it is, it's so high that people can't pay the price. So now paper money has become profuse everywhere, and the governments are producing large amounts of paper money, and inflation is going up. And pretty soon that whole system will end. And they'll get into a digital system of economics where you don't have any kind of form of currency anymore. Everything is run through the banking systems, where the banks control all of your money, and everything is done through debit and credit through electronic means. That means if they want to shut your money off, all they have to do is shut your account down and you have no money at all. So, and Prabhupada said this paper money will, he said, you can use it just to stuff your pillow. It will be completely useless after some time. So we're starting to see, and if you do some research, you'll see that many of the things that Prabhupada is saying is happening right now. But the most important thing is we're not so much worried about what's happening in the material world. That's not our business. Our business is to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions for Krishna consciousness. And that one of the main instructions is to seek out a means of livelihood, both for the society and for the world in general. And Prabhupada said these farm communities are a stable way to live according to moral, spiritual, aesthetic principles, which allow for the individual to have enough time for Krishna consciousness and at the same time not have to work unnecessarily for some kind of economic gain, which is going to be useless anyway. Because when you have land and you have metals, precious metals, even if you have livestock, you have equity. So the reason I'm presenting this, of course, I just recently put together a series of lectures in the form of a book supported by many of Srila Prabhupada's quotes. The book is being published, printed now, and it'll be out hopefully very soon. We don't know, maybe in a couple months. But I want to illustrate this particular point because devotees have to look seriously at what Srila Prabhupada is saying, and at the same time seeing what's happening in the world, to see how we're going to continue to live in this world, both for ourselves and for our children and for our children's children, how these generations can continue. And so Prabhupada's fourth part, and Prabhupada said that, he said, 50% of my mission has not been established. And when they asked Prabhupada, what was that? He said, self-sufficiency farm communities. And in 1977, 2 months before Prabhupada departed the planet, Prabhupada made a personal effort to go to Gitanagari from Vrindavan, India, to Gitanagari, to go to teach the devotees how to establish this farm communities and agriculture. Unfortunately, Prabhupada got as far as London, and his health collapsed in London. He was forced to go back to India. And then we know in November 14th, 1977, Prabhupada disappeared from the world. But he gave us 3 of the 4 principles of his mission in a very solid, active form. And he left this up to us to establish this 4th part, farm communities, self-sufficient, natural living. And so there's efforts around the world in different places, in Mayapur, in the Vrindavan area, and in other places. Many individual devotees do have farms, and there's others who are thinking of starting farms. So I'm thinking devotees should seriously consider that that if it's necessary, of course, you have 2 options. One is that we could actually move out of our present situation now and get involved in these farms. And Prabhupada says the farms are mostly for the grihastas, for the families. He says we'll keep the city activities going because in the cities we need to be there to preach, because people will be harassed so much in the cities. Here's a good place to preach. So he said for the sannyasis and for the brahmacharis, they can travel and preach, and for the grihastas, they can live on our farms and establish this self-sufficiency as the foundation for the proliferation of the Krishna conscious movement around the world. So it's being done in some places by certain individuals. You have the Hungarian farm, which is moving very strongly in that area. You have Gitanagari, which is moving nicely in that area, and then there's other places. You have Saranagati in Canada, and I don't know all of the places that are doing this, but there is not enough emphasis within the society to develop it, and so it's up to the individuals to take hold of this particular program of Srila Prabhupada and see how we can fit into it. We may not, I'm not asking people to give up their jobs and leave the cities and run to the farms. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that what Prabhupada is saying is the future of their movement. And as we see from the social, political, and economic case in the world, that things are collapsing all around the world. And this was predicted by Srila Prabhupada. I would suggest you listen to that discussion by Govinda Dasi on Namras's podcast. She's very enthusiastic to present what she heard directly from Prabhupada. I say directly, he told her that in person, and he also restated that in many other places. I can read a few other statements by Srila Prabhupada regarding the present civilization. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, gold standard currency is based on falsehood because the currency is not on par with the reserve gold. The basic principle is falsity because currency notes are issued in value beyond that of the actual reserved gold. This artificial inflation of currency by the authorities encourages prostitution of the state economy. But Prabhupada was very intelligent in other areas. He was not only a great sadhu, but he understood economics. He was a very successful businessman before he actually took up preaching worldwide. Here's another statement. Prabhupada says, well, let me see. That's based on the same thing here. And of course, this is a statement, this is a very interesting statement by one former president of the United States, Harry S. Truman, on August 8, 1950. It says here, once a government is committed to the principle of silencing the voice of opposition, it has only one way to go, and that is down the path of increasing repressive measures until it becomes a source of terror for all its citizens and creates a country where everyone lives in fear. That is happening right now. That's by a former president. And so there are many other statements about what is going on in the world, and the whole artificial principle of paper currency. It has really no value, and it can be stopped at any moment. And then your paper is no longer what it is just paper. I have many of these statements that I have in front of me about Srila Prabhupada. Here he says, this civilization will collapse. It cannot run on. Fourth-class men, I tell, because it's conducted by fourth-class men. He says, we don't want cities. There won't be any cities. The cities will collapse. Collapse means it'll be no longer inhabitable by ordinary people. It'll simply be places of crime and economic exploitation. Here's another one. Here's one. This one is a room conversation, January 21st, 1977. Prabhupada, everything I get from the land. So I happen to go outside for exchange. If you're satisfied in your farm, you're satisfied. Then where is the question of exchange? There's no need of artificial exchange. So this banking, Prabhupada called banking, called it thanking, everything will collapse automatically. There is no money. Who is going to keep money in the bank? So this artificial way of banking, that will also collapse. And it's not just wanton statements. When you understood the moral turpitude that is being propagated in the name of economic development, godlessness, and wanton sense gratification based on a lifestyle of enjoying your senses as much as possible in any possible way, you see that it can't last because it's against the laws of nature, it's against the laws of God. It destroys the aesthetic, moral, and spiritual values of the living entity. The living entity is not the material body. The necessities that we have to take care of in terms of the material body are minimal compared to our activities on the spiritual platform. But the society is geared the other way. That means people are simply spending time fortifying and trying to satisfy the senses of the body more and more and more and more. And therefore, it is becoming more and more sinful and more demoniac. What I actually have as far as information, I cannot speak everything in this particular state. The time is not there, but some of it is so horrendous, you wouldn't believe what's going on in the world. It is actually the activities of barbarians. It's so bad. And so therefore, when Prabhupada said this civilization will collapse, it is because of moral turpitude. There will be no morality left. People will define morality according to what they consider to be satisfying their own senses. And that's happening now. There's no more standard of morality anymore. It's just like do whatever you want to do and call it freedom of choice. Okay, so I'll stop there and maybe we can see if the devotees have any comments or questions and any realizations based on what was discussed.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj, for giving us the insight of what Prabhupada's view about the simple living and how it connects to the Vedic culture and how it will help the future generation, basically. So devotees, if you have any questions, comments, realizations, please unmute yourself and ask questions. And please keep your cameras on if you can. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Anyone? Comment?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My humble obeisances to you.
Hare Krishna.
I'm always very, very amazed by the clarity with which you speak. And I very much appreciate like how you delineated how Prabhupada's movement started with kirtans and then books and then deity worship and it gives a lot of clarity personally for me to see where different people from different cultures fit and what inspires and attracts them. And yeah, I mean, personally, my takeaway from like what was discussed in the first half of the class was that preaching is not an option. It's not optional. Just because deity worship is going on well in a community, it doesn't like give us the privilege or like allow us to slack in preaching in any way. And it has to go on. That somehow like came to me as I was listening to you. And I mean, I think anybody with a little bit of insight or thoughtfulness would completely agree with Prabhupada that our society is not really a functional society because it just drives people more and more into the mode of passion and ignorance to the point they become like totally frustrated. It's visible, but somehow I think people cannot see the alternative. And Prabhupada has given us the alternative to move to a place that's more sober, like move to the farms and grow our own food and just basically like live closer to nature and God. So that was my takeaway, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That was a nice summation of everything. But that coming into that natural lifestyle is also healthier. We have to understand that it's a healthy lifestyle. This city life is not healthy. With the noise, with the pollution, with all the anxieties that people have to undergo in order to maintain city life. This wears down the values, the lifestyle, and the consciousness of the living entity. So I didn't speak so much about that area about health, but these farms or more natural living is more of a healthier lifestyle. The air is more fresher. As Prabhupada said, growing your own food is 100 times more nutritious than buying food from the supermarkets, because the whole activity of agriculture centers around the principle of bhakti, where the activities of agriculture are actually a devotional activity. And it's not just producing food, but it's offering that activity to Krishna in devotion. Therefore, from the planting of the seed to when the food goes onto the altar and offered to the Lord, every part of that activity is part of devotional service. So it's a spiritual activity, as opposed to just, going into the store, buying some potatoes, cooking them, and then offering them. That's nice. That's what we do. But if you compare it to the activity of devotional service, then the whole process becomes devotional. Just like Prabhupada has warned us in his books, do not eat food produced by the non-devotees, especially grains. He says it will affect your consciousness. And our consciousness is affected by eating food, especially, like they produce so much bread out there, crackers and breads and various types of substances with various types of grains. The consciousness of the cooks and the producers go into that. And what you get is, and when you eat it, you get, sometimes you pick up that negative consciousness that comes out in the form of bad dreams or crazy dreams, various types of things like that. These are, or it just makes it hard to control the mind when you're performing devotional life. So this lifestyle is holistic. It's not just an escape from the hard life of the city. It's actually natural to live in that way. And just like, for instance, cows, I brought this out in this upcoming book, that even now the non-devotees have discovered that there's a therapy that by using cows, you can cure people's anxiety. So they have programs where you go and associate and live with cows for a while. And then they have a program for doing that, and you're free from your anxiety. Just being with cows will get rid of your mental anxieties that are created by this wrong lifestyle. But cows are auspicious, and the whole idea of self-sufficiency and agriculture and farm community centers around the cow and the bull, both, not just the cow, but the cow and the bull. And when you understand deeper the values of keeping these animals, serving these animals, and developing these animals, you find that it comes out in many auspicious forms. Good mental health, happiness, healthy food, lifestyle. So it's not just from a point of view of, developing simple living to get away from the cities. It's actually natural to live like this. There was a book, not a book, more like a pamphlet. It's called Krishna the Pharmacharya. I have it in my library. It was put out by devotees from Switzerland a number of years ago. And in it, it describes very nicely how Krishna lived and how Krishna wanted us to live. So, the reason I'm putting this out is the devotees should be ready that, as time goes on, it's going to be more and more incumbent to change our lifestyle in order to survive. And this is the change, not just readjusting our material lifestyle to fit into the social political situations, which are going to become more and more oppressive. One thing we can say for sure, governments around the world will become more and more totalitarian in controlling the people on all aspects of life. It's coming now. If you're a little bit observing about what's happening, you'll see more people are being more and more under control now by state and local governments more and more. You can't even do anything without being watched by Big Brother. This was predicted in the 1980s in the form of a few books that were written, showing that the future of the world will be like this. The governments will take over the whole population, they'll control the population, all the way down to everything. You won't be able to even, have your own privacy at home anymore. Everything will be monitored by we call it Big Brother. It's happening already. And you'll see it's happening slowly. More and more repressive measures are coming up, more and more and more. And those of you who work, taxes are increasing, tariffs are increasing, various ways of getting your money is increasing. The government wants all of your money, not just part of it. They want it all. Yeah. So we should get out of this idea that everything's going to be go back to the way it was maybe 10 years ago. Let's forget that. It's only going to get worse from the political and social and economic points of view, which social unrest will increase more and more, and it's happening all around the world. And as Prabhupada says, when governments can't manage the society, they start wars in order to bring people into the country's nationalism, and that stops all of the internal insurrections in order to create an enemy on the outside. And this is called the Machiavellian theory of how to control populations within the society. When there's too much social unrest, what happens is the governments declare wars outside to unite the people internally against an external enemy. And that's how they keep the country together. That is a theory. It's called Machiavellian's theory, and they use it all the time. And there's many stories around that. So you can expect that. As Prabhupada says, these wars and these famines are not just simply coming by natural arrangements. They're actually planned in order to control populations. So with a little bit of insight, we're not going to be so much worried about what's happening on the external world. Our job is to become Krishna conscious and actually to see how to live as society goes on. And Prabhupada has given us the formula: rural communities, farm communities, more of a natural lifestyle, less dependent on the society for our basic needs.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Shridevi Mataji, you have a question?
Thank you, Leela Mandri, for that insight. That was, yes, the preaching must go on, because preaching, I'll give you an example with something I thought of while you were speaking. A man is sitting on a limb of a tree, and he's sawing on the inside of the limb, and his friend comes along and says, "Hey, you keep sawing like that, you're going to fall to the ground." And so and the man who's sawing, he just waves him away. You don't know what you're talking about. And so then the man keeps sawing, and he falls to the ground. And then he gets up and he runs to the man. He said, "Boy, you must have been a prophet. How did you know that?" So the idea is, we're seeing that people are in everyone else to hell. So our job is not to say, "Well, okay, that's good. I'm not interested in what's happening to you. I got my own life." No, we are telling people, become Krishna conscious. That's our job. That's human life. So preaching is not, as you said, it's not optional. It's a way to wake people up to what is important in life. Become Krishna conscious. Become God conscious. It's not an option anymore. It's a matter of survival.
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, what Prabhupada is saying and like what we are experiencing is like very vivid, especially around us at this point, because the governments are totally controlled by the capitalists, and they have no time to think about the welfare of the people at all, at any level.
No, it's just it's economic gain. When you connect with the different modes, you connect with the modes of passion and ignorance, then lust and greed become prominent. The mode of passion is lust, the mode of ignorance is greed. People become more greedy and more lusty. That's all. They're controlled by that, and they live according to that because they actually think that that is for their own self-interest. So greed. The more you have, the more you want. That's what greed is. Because material things cannot satisfy the living entity. Satisfaction comes on the spiritual platform. So this greed is an artificial way to try to find satisfaction. That's all it is. But it seems to be the only way for the materialists. Devotees know that living simply, centering our relationships around God and family and relationships based on these principles makes the living entity happy and satisfied. It's not by material things that people become satisfied. Material things cannot satisfy the soul because the soul is by nature spiritual, where material things are contrary. You can't love your computer, you can't love your car. Although people tried to do that. They actually tried to find happiness and love in inanimate objects, where love and happiness is only done on the same platform you exist on with a living being.
Very, very true, Maharaj. Very true.
Yeah. So this whole society is just in the wrong direction. Oh, get more, enjoy more. But who's enjoying? People are getting, but they're not enjoying. If they're enjoying, people would be happy. Can you say people are happy? No. Okay, Sri Devi, you have something? Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
There you go.
Thank you, dear Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to your divine grace. As you were speaking, Guru Maharaj, I was thinking about so many things that Srila Prabhupada warned us about. And that very famous conversation in Atlanta when Srila Prabhupada was on the morning walk, and he lifted his walking stick, his cane, pointed it to the skyline, and he said, one day, all these cities will collapse. Do you know why? And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj answered, because they cannot grow their food, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, yes, you cannot eat nuts and bolts. This industrialization is just producing more and more gadgets and gizmos and technology and this and that. But we can't eat our cell phones and our devices and we need food. And the way things are going, there's going to be scarcity of rainfall. There's going to be less and less availability of food. And there's going to be food wars because people will not have enough food to eat. And I mean, the chaos and the unrest is already beginning. I was briefly, maybe a couple of years, I was living in a city in New York, in US before coming out here. And every day, without fail, there was crime being reported. Somebody's home was broken in, somebody was shot at, somebody's purse was stolen, somebody was held up, carjackings, car break-ins, so many things on a daily basis, And this was on a neighborhood watch website. And people would tell the police, and the police would say, we can't do anything. Try and find the criminal yourself.
Yeah, police can't do it. It's just too overwhelming. They don't even care anymore. But Prabhupada also, I was just listening just not long ago. Prabhupada said, there will be no more milk, no more rice, no more wheat, and no more sugar. He mentioned these 4 things 2 or 3 times in different lectures. He says these things will be gone, will be scarcity. Prabhupada and Govinda Dasi in her discussions, he said, Prabhupada also said there will be food scarcities. And then people will be fighting amongst each other to grab as much food as they can. So she was saying that we should plan for that. And of course, Prabhupada said to start these farms, but then devotees are also thinking of stockpiling food and water in case of these scarcities do come up. Prabhupada also talks about the artificial famine created by the Indian government in the 1940s during the Second World War, where they wanted more soldiers to join the army. So the government created this artificial famine within India, and they withheld foodstuffs from people all around. Of course, there were farmers that were still able to grow, but in general, in the cities, they did this. And what happened was people were dying because of lack of food. So this is also a political tactic to get people involved with war. When war actually comes, is they withhold food so people join the army so they can get something to eat. That happened in India, 1944, I think Prabhupada was saying. So yeah. So Govinda Dasi mentions that Prabhupada said there will be food scarcities, also coming up with this collapse of the civilization. So therefore, again, he emphasized the importance of developing these farm communities.
And we need seed banks to preserve the seeds in order to grow crops, because of all the genetically modified crops that are being pushed onto the common people in order to grab even the food producing capacity of the people.
Yeah.
Seed preserving and keeping our seeds is going to be more valuable than hoarding gold, because these seeds are the future for our food.
Yeah, but now they produce these GMO seeds where you buy them from different agencies. They last for 1 year, and then you have to go buy that seed again the next year in order to produce it. So there is a strong, I have videos on this about how the government's trying to control the food supplies now, like by producing more scarcity in different areas. And so they can create these factory farms and use food as a means for controlling the population. Food distribution. This is another way to control the population, by creating food scarcities and then distributing food accordingly. All you have to do is read the Bhagavatam and listen to Prabhupada. I mean, if both of these things are clear of what is happening in the present and what happened in the past and what will happen in the future. This is Kali Yuga. You have to remember that. Kali Yuga is an age of difficulty. It's not Satya Yuga, it's Kali Yuga. But one thing that Govinda Dasi said, which I thought was very interesting, she said, there's a very dark period coming up for them. She didn't say for how many years. I think she said about 10 years. They said this is all meant to usher in Lord Chaitanya's golden age. Actually, she said behind this whole thing is Lord Chaitanya and the demigods, which are pushing out this old civilization and bringing in the new civilization in the form of this of the golden age. So when you look at it from the highest perspective, you see that things are being engineered in order to get rid of this civilization and bring people back to spiritual life. And in order to do that, you have to clean house. That means there has to be the old has to go before the new can come in. So this is interesting because it's in line with what the Bhagavatam is saying. Because Lord Chaitanya has predicted that every town and village, Krishna consciousness will flourish. But you'll see before any bright light comes, there's a dark tunnel that the civilization has to pass through. And that dark tunnel is throwing out the old and bringing in the new. So our job, and this was Govinda Dasi was mentioning, our job, she said, and this is the thing I've been saying, is two things: to establish these farm communities and have devotees chanting everywhere around the world. Harinams, programs for chanting. Just keep chanting to get devotees more and more involved in Harinam, japa, and various types of preaching. We are insulated and protected from all of this craziness going on around us if we stay connected with each other through the process of Harinam Sankirtan. We are not going to be affected at all. We'll pass through this, and as Prabhupada also said, he said that this was the clinching statement. He said, this Krishna consciousness movement will save the world in its darkest hour. He has said that twice in different lectures. This Krishna conscious movement will save the world in its darkest hour. So we have the formula, we have the lifestyle, and we also have the means is to spread the glories of the holy name everywhere and anywhere throughout all towns and villages. How much we're doing it depends on how fast Lord Chaitanya's movement develops.
So Guru Maharaj, what does this mean for us at our level as devotees? What is the action plan we should be having on our tables, and what should we be working towards?
Well, it's both individual and collective. On a collective level, bring all the devotees together and just harinams, kirtans, more and more preaching, reaching out and working on establishing these farm communities. That's on the collective level. On the individual level, you have to see how to fit into this. But I think that's easy. It's all based on leadership. When the leadership takes hold and gives a direction and vision, according to Srila Prabhupada's instructions, then everyone else can follow that vision, that enlightened visionary leadership. It's there.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj.
I think the biggest problem is what to do with this paper money. If you have a lot of it, and then if these banks collapse, then it's just what it is, paper money. So the idea is to figure out what to do with it. Invest it in land, invested it in, I don't know, helping projects to preach Krishna consciousness around the world. I have so much more I could say, but it's all based on my study of the present world situation, which is quite cataclysmic when you really come right down to it. So, but again, it's predicted that this will happen according to a certain stage of bringing in Lord Chaitanya's movement. It's all about getting rid of the old. That golden age is there. Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he's working to inspire us and maybe other people who are also quite enlightened. There are people even outside of our society who understand what's going on, to somehow or other move forward in this direction. Prabhupada gave us the pattern, the formula, the means, and Lord Chaitanya has said that this is the future. So I would say on the practical level, continue in your lifestyle now, but always be ready that any time you have an opportunity to shift yourself to a farm community and take up lifestyle there. Be ready to do that at any given time. And at the same time, see what you can do to assist Lord Chaitanya. As it's understood by Prabhupada, Prabhupada wanted each and every devotee to be an instrument for preaching Krishna consciousness. When you're preaching Krishna consciousness, you are, free from all of these anxieties that come by way of living in this material world. And it's needed. People need to hear this message. Chant Hare Krishna.
Shridevi Mataji.
She's absorbed. She's absorbed. She's really thinking very hard.
I'm very concerned because I have this protective feeling for all the devotees. I want all the devotees to be nicely taken care of, and my hope and prayer is somehow or the other we can all, rally together and stay safe and carry on with consciousness.
It's not going to happen. Some devotees will fall away. Some will become victimized by this whole situation. Others will rise to the occasion. Yeah, but the formula is there. Just like here in Slovenia, just while I was giving my class, I could hear the Harinam going out. Devotees are out in the streets chanting and dancing and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. They've been going out practically every day, distributing books and enlivening people with the holy name. I went out a few days ago and I was amazed to see how receptive people were. Because there is somewhat of a void in people's minds about what will happen in the future.
There is a question, Guru Maharaj, from Brad Prabhu. Is it okay if I read it out? Yeah. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj,
Yes, please.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to you, Maharaj. Maharaj, you spoke on quality leadership. How can we usher in a stronger new generation of devotees and educate them without animosity for our own vision for the future of ISKCON? I heard that hard times in society create even harder men. So how can we be hopeful and educate the devotees we have so that we will have peace of mind for the future of ISKCON? Youth get a lot of fingers pointed at them by senior devotees. But my question is, how can we press forward without overwhelming anxiety over the future? Thank you, Maharaj. I apologize for not asking or having my camera on, as work has been occupied in that regard.
I think I got the question. Can you kind of summarize that, what he said, into a question?
So Guru Maharaj, I think he's saying that he's asking that how can we, educate the future generation, because the harder the society become, the harder the circumstances become, the harder we will become from hard and from our activities as well. So we'll become hard as well. So how we can, educate the society and the youth in the movement so that they can progress nicely and peacefully.
Oh, everything is there in our process. The educational system is there. That was one of Srila Prabhupada's main things. For instance, right now in Mayapur, one of my godbrothers is starting the Vanashram College, which is the foundation for education based on Srila Prabhupada's fourth program of farm communities and self-sufficient. Along with that was Vana and Ashram, aligning people within their Varnas and Ashrams. In other words, engaging people according to their propensities and not just giving people service according to the needs of the temple or the yatra. In other words, that requires evaluation and education. So Prabhupada also spoke about these Vanashram colleges, but it never really got off the ground. Radha Desh did it for a little bit of the time, but then after some time they weren't able to continue it. This Vanashram College is actually the foundation for establishing that society where each and every person fits in accordingly and has service and an ashram that is ideal for their spiritual and what we say devotional development. Devotional development means the activities they perform. Spiritual means the consciousness that they develop at the same time. So education and training is, Prabhupada put so much emphasis on it. So one of the ways to formulate that education and training is these Vanashram colleges. And so we're starting one in Mayapur. Bhakti Raghava Swami is working, and we got a piece of land, and we're going to be building a college there, and then inviting people to come, training teachers, and also inviting people to come and receive this kind of education as a foundation for developing both the spiritual and the practical social organization within the society. This is where our society is a little weak. We don't have social organization. It's not developed. Although we have a strong spiritual understanding, that foundation is not organized in a direct way. For an example, each of the leaders we find emphasizes a particular way to preach Krishna consciousness. And that's important and that's needed. But in that variety, there should be a type of unity that synchronizes all of these in one direction. And that comes with training people in two areas. One, giving them the education, the spiritual education, and engaging them. This is the thing, is engaging them in practical devotional service where they can make progress. I might ask all of you, how many of you are regularly engaged in devotional service? How many of you are actually doing devotional service? And how much devotional service do you do each day? And do you do whatever you want, or you do whatever you feel is necessary? So everybody, our society is not organized around these two things. And this is where this college comes in to more or less to formulate a program of organization around spiritual education and practical engagement in service according to the nature of the individual. When you have that, then everyone can fit in on one level or another, because not everyone's on the same spiritual level. And to try to homogenize everybody into one particular way of doing things is artificial. You have to have education and training according to the level of a person's advancement in spiritual life and according to their tendencies to engage in service. All of these things have to be organized. And this is where the Varnashram College comes in. And there could be also parallel educational programs to support the Varnashram scheme, but the Prabhupada emphasized that mostly, which was emphasizing Brahminical education. But we want to expand that education into not only in the Brahminical, but also in the other areas of education for practical service activities. How to be expert in developing farms, how to be expert in managing and organizing temples and engaging devotees in various ways. All the knowledge of expertise is available, and there's people who have those qualities, but it's not being used. And therefore, a lot of people go out and work a job for the secular world. Instead of putting their energy in developing the society, we go out and we work a job for some non-devotee. We get some paper money and we use our skills in that way. Right? So we're half in and half out of Krishna consciousness. But that's not Prabhupada's program for development. Just like the organizational side of the Kshatriyas. We did a program, we're trying to organize the Kshatriyas to use their talents to develop security systems for our temples all around the world. And I found in exploring these different persons, many of them were teaching people on the outside in order for them to get money so they could live in the world. They were using their skills for economic development, and they were using their skills to help people in the outside development. I was thinking, why not bring it into the society and use it for our development of our temples and our devotees? So we have that. Not only that's only in one area, there's many areas like that. What was successful, what Radhanath Swami Maharaj did in Chalpati was amazing. He had all of these devotees who are doctors. And rather than having them have their own private practices everywhere, they started a hospital. It was a Krishna consciousness hospital, where they were teaching, giving medical care along with spiritual care at the same time. So he brought all the doctors together pretty much under one roof where they could associate with each other as devotees and as doctors, and he shares their medical skills and their devotional association, and at the same time do a service for society. That was Varnashram in its best right there. Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai. You go, you'll see. Every room, they have this speaker. You turn on the speaker, and you have two channels. One channel is Prabhupada chanting Hare Krishna, and the other one is Prabhupada speaking classes. That's in the rooms. And all the patients get that. The devotee and the food is prasadam and the restaurant. They have a cafeteria there. Everything is offered to the deities. They have a temple inside of the hospital. It's a nice temple with big Jagannath deities. Daily worship. People can go and sit, chant, have darshan. At scheduled times throughout the day, all the doctors stop, all the staff workers stop. They all come into one area and they chant prayers together for about a half hour, an hour, twice a day. They do that, and then they go back to their medical activities. It's amazing. They've created this, Krishna Consciousness Hospital. It's administering people's medical needs, and at the same time, it's allowing all of these devotees who are doctors to associate together, both in their varna and in their spiritual practice. That's a model to use for the rest of the society.
Thanks, Guru Maharaj. Brett Babu, does it answer your question? I'm sure he's listening. Yes, he said, thank you, Maharaj. Any other questions, devotees?
Why do we send children to karmi schools? So they can learn all bad habits. And Prabhupada wanted to establish the Gurukul system, and then also develop, more higher education than just young children. He had a whole system of education centered around, which would include secular subject matters also. And people could get accreditations through social agencies that are connected with society based on our schools. We've started this Avanti school in England, which was that was the idea there. You have a child, and then you send him out to the slaughterhouse to be slaughtered with all this materialistic education. Then you wonder when they come home and they have bad habits, you wonder what happened. Yeah. So putting time and energy into developing just like in Chowpatty, they have Gopal's Gardens, which is a beautiful Krishna conscious school that's run by the devotees exclusively. Gopal's Gardens. I actually went there and saw how the kids were trained. It was nice. They not only learn subject matter, they learn proper behavior as a devotee. They become humble. They become, what we say, educated in various subject matters. They develop respect and obedience to superiors. Kids nowadays don't listen to their parents because they're associating with people from the outside. I was with one particular devotee, her children are going to school, and the kid's coming back with all bad habits. He doesn't like it, but this is his peer group. He was telling me some of the most craziest things that go on in school.
That's very true, Guru Maharaj. It's very scary, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
Like a 13-year-old, and I do get nervous about it, sending him to the school. Yes.
Yeah, Prabhupada's program was, gurukuls everywhere, when educational devotees, and schools for devotees. They can also learn secular subject matters, but the main education is Krishna consciousness.
Absolutely.
The character of the individual is the worth of the individual. It's all about building character.
So I guess is there any other question?
Okay.
Maybe.
Let's see where. Okay. So think about this particular program that Srila Prabhupada has projected for the future of our society, and how each and every one of us can become more a part of developing in that area, both on a practical level by our own activities and then on a larger level by supporting projects that are in line with Prabhupada's programs.
Definitely, Guru Maharaj, by your blessing, hopefully it will happen.
Well, what will happen is that we generally don't wake up until everything falls apart, and then we wake up. I saw a cartoon where the whole world is collapsed, and this one man, he's got his television in his hand, and he's holding the cord for the television. He's looking for a place to plug in his television, but the whole world is already destroyed. He's still looking for an outlet to plug in his television. It's a cartoon, but it really illustrates people's, we won't give up on our lifestyle until everything is crashed and taken away. Raja Vilasini, you have something to offer?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, and Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisance to you. All grace to Srila Prabhupada, all grace to you, Guru Maharaj. I don't have any question, Guru Maharaj, not even comment either. But thank you for discussing about the book. I definitely gonna read it. But I have a message for you from one old time, your devotee from Chicago, whom I met yesterday at my work. Her name is Priya Gambhir, and her dad's name
Priya
Gambhir, and her